What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another UFC breakdown and predictions video, this time for UFC Saudi Arabia, Whittaker versus Aliskerov. Now, I did not make a recap video for UFC Vegas 93, but we ended up going 7-4 during that event, so not the best, not the worst. Still have room for improvement, so hopefully we have a nice a prediction rate here at UFC Saudi Arabia. Now, as you guys know, this was originally supposed to be Chimaev versus Whittaker, but Chimaev was apparently he was deathly ill, but then he came out that he had food poisoning. I don't know what the case is, but Aliskerov came and stepped in on short notice. He was actually supposed to fight last week, if I'm not mistaken, and he ended up taking this main event. So it's a big spot for him, big step up in competition as well. So good for him for sneaking into this opportunity here. But this card has been in shambles. There's been I believe nine full-on cancellations or a fighter withdrawing from these matchups. So we ended up with only 11 fights for the Saudi Arabia card, but that's all right. Hopefully we get some exciting fights. Hopefully we get some good matchups to watch, and it starts at noon, so we don't have to wait for fights. I love that. You wake up, have a coffee, chill for a bit, and then we got fights to watch. So let's get into the breakdowns. I do forewarn you guys that I did not do much tape study on this event. I am familiar with most of these fighters, so I'm going to go off the dome here. We're going to look up some stuff on Tapology just for referencing, and we're going to see how it goes this week in terms of predictions. So make sure you guys hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and drop some comments down below on what you think of these matchups. Whether you agree or disagree with my picks, it doesn't matter. Just drop your comments down below. I'm excited to hear your guys' perspective. Now let's get into the breakdowns. First off, we have Long Xiao going up against Chang Ho Lee. Now this is a road to UFC finale that was originally supposed to be back in December, but the event was postponed until February, and then Long Xiao actually withdrew from that fight. And now here we are. Now I don't know why he withdrew. I don't know if it was an illness thing, what it was, or an injury. I'm not sure, but they rescheduled it for today. So these guys are going to be fighting for the road to UFC bantamweight I don't know if they would be like champions of it. I don't know how they would refer to it, but I'm going to be picking Chang Ho Lee in this fight. I'm unfamiliar with both of these guys. I was unable to find much tape to watch on them. These are the only two I really dove deep a little bit to try to find some previous fights from them, but the only fight I was actually able to find for Long Xiao, I don't know if I didn't look in the right spots, what the case was, but I saw his fight he had previously on the Contender Series back in 2021 against Christian Quinones, so that might not be like a realistic depiction of his abilities now. He's had 4 fights since then, but from what I saw in that matchup, he likes to throw heavy. He does slow down as the fight goes on, but he is very hittable. We now know how Quinones' UFC career has played out after that fight, and he was able to land on Quinones, but like I said, we've seen what Quinones is capable of. He has shown to be hittable throughout his UFC tenure as well, so there's not really much to take from there. But Quinones was also piecing up Long Xiao in that fight. The longer it went on, the slower and more fatigued Xiao looked. He was getting pieced up. I don't know if he ended up getting dropped, but he was stunned, I believe, in that second round, got all bloodied up. So he got pieced up by Quinones in that fight, and that's not really a really good look. On the Chang Ho Lee side, I was able to watch his 2 previous road to UFC fights, and he had a fantastic opening round, I guess, back in May of 2023. He got a first round finish. He got the back mount on the ground, flattened out his opponent, and then just pummeled him, got a TKO victory. But his last fight against Darmisi Zawupasi, I don't know how to pronounce that name, but it was a 7-0 fighter who was dominating him in clinch and the wrestling and grappling scenarios. The first 2 rounds, Chang Ho Lee actually gave up. He lost both those 2 rounds, typically because of that wrestling pressure, the clinching, the grappling from his opponent. His opponent had great dominance in that portion of the fight, and it didn't really last on the feet very long. But what I did notice in that fight was Chang Ho Lee is a dog. This guy does not go anywhere. Despite being down 2 rounds, he could have easily packed it in, but he did not give up, and he ended up finishing Chang Ho Lee similarly to how he did Chang Ho Lee ended up finishing his opponent similar to how he did in the opening round of the Road to UFC. Got a TKO ground and pound victory on the ground. That was a fantastic come from behind victory after getting dominated over the first 2 rounds. And it was in a department that Long Xiao isn't really, at least from what I saw, isn't going to implement. Long Xiao is going to sit down on his punches. He's going to come forward and want to strike. He's going to want to scrap with Chang Ho Lee. And I just think that besides like maybe the power level, I don't think he's better than Chang Ho Lee anywhere. I think Chang is going to be the better, more technical striker. He has a great high kick. We saw that in his previous fight on the road to UFC. And if Chang Ho Lee wants to clinch up and wrestle, I think he's going to be able to do that, wear down Long Xiao, and maybe even get a late finish similar to his previous fight. So I will take Chang Ho Lee in this matchup. I think he's just better everywhere. Maybe not. I think maybe Long Xiao has the power advantage and experience advantage, as you guys see, but it's always tricky to determine how good somebody is when they have so many fights from the eastern part or that region of the world, because you don't know what level of competition they're really fighting. I'm unfamiliar with it, which I'm sure a lot of us out in the West are, but regardless, I think Chang Ho Lee gets this done. Let's move on. Next up, we got Magomed Gadzhiyasulov going up against Brenson Ribeiro, and these two are Dana White's Contender Series alumni. Ribeiro is actually in his sophomore outing, and Gadzhiyasulov, this is his UFC debut, if I'm not mistaken, and I will be going with the heavy favorite of Gadzhiyasulov. Reason being is typically from the region that he's from, it's a dominant wrestling region, as we all know, and he has that in his back pocket, but he's not your typical fighter from that spot. He will implement the clinching. He will implement the wrestling if he needs to, which I think will be smart against somebody like Ribeiro. But he has a kickboxing base. He has fantastic technique on the feet, and he will be the better striker in this matchup. Ribeiro is definitely dangerous on the feet. He has the power to put anybody away. But the thing is, he is very hittable, and he doesn't really have a chin. He's been knocked out 3 times in his career, more recently being to Mingyang Zhang in his UFC debut. He got knocked out in less than 2 minutes, and in that fight, I had Ribeiro. I have had a terrible time betting on Ribeiro fights. I had Bruno Lopez against him on the Contender Series, and I had him to defeat Zhang, which he did not. But the thing about Ribeiro is he's very hittable, so he wants to close the pocket despite being a lengthy guy. He likes to counter as well, but he will throw a 1-2 to kind of get the exchanges going. And then like I said, he just throws caution to the wind kind of in those exchanges. Even though he does use his length sometimes to kind of counter-attack his opponent, he doesn't mind crashing the pocket, and I don't think that's a really smart plan, especially at light heavyweight. Going up against somebody like Gadzhiyasulov, I think Magomed is going to find those holes, and I don't know, I don't want to say necessarily put him away, because I don't know how long Gadzhiyasulov is going to strike with this guy. I think Gadzhiyasulov should just wrestle immediately and take away that danger factor early and maybe start striking later on in the fight. But the thing I noticed with Ribeiro is that 1-2 was really his downfall against Zhang. He threw it multiple times in that first round, and then in that last finishing sequence, Zhang just timed his combination perfectly on Ribeiro's entry, and I just don't know if that's like a lack of IQ thing or just head hunting on the Ribeiro side, but I don't think it's going to work against somebody as technical on the feet as Magomed Gadzhiyasulov, and I like the fact that Gadzhiyasulov has that wrestling in his back pocket to take away that danger factor from Ribeiro. So I don't like how badly he got knocked out in his last fight. I'm going to side with Gadzhiyasulov, and Gadzhiyasulov had a great showing in his Dana White's Contender Series fight, but it was against somebody named Jose Medina, and even though Medina is he's a dog, he's not going anywhere, he won't give up on himself, he's super tough, super durable, I just don't think he's to the level of some of the guys that Gadzhiyasulov's going to fight, so I don't want to praise him too much for that win, but he did what he was supposed to do. I think he'll be able to get it done on Saturday. against Ribeiro. Next up, we got Kang going up against Gafurov. Now, this fight, I am going to be picking the underdog in Kang. I don't typically like picking the older fighter in specific matchups when there's this big of an age gap. So he's 36, Gafurov is 28, so there's 8 years between the two. It's just, I don't think Gafurov is that good. He's just all pressure. He's all wild. I had a good word for it earlier when I was breaking down these fights. But he's just kind of crazy when he's in there. He's just full force. He'll shoot takedowns. He'll throw big. Has all these big movements, and it tends to get him, like, he does end up gassing out because of that. Now, Kang is a wily vet. He has the cardio to go the full 3 rounds and kind of sustain a style like Gafurov is going to put on him with that pressure. I think Kang is just the better fighter. I think the reason why Gafurov is the favorite in this matchup is just probably the age thing, and the fact that he is kind of wild, so he might be able to just kind of dominate early, but then Kang has to kind of catch up in those second and third rounds. But there's not much of a technical breakdown here. There's not really anything other than the fact that I just think personally Kang is a better fighter. He's going to be a better striker. I think he's going to be good enough to stay on his feet if Gafurov shoots those takedowns, and I'm just going to have to go with Kang. I don't think Gafurov is very good. He's 0-2 in the UFC so far. His first one, I believe, was on short notice against John Castaneda, who Kang has lost to as well. So I'm not going to give him too much. I can't actually give him too much slack or too much flack. I don't know. I can't hate on him too much for his 2 losses, I guess, in the UFC. Castaneda also beat Kang, and Said Nurmagomedov guillotine choked him in 1 minute and 13 seconds in his sophomore outing in the UFC. And that's another reason why I was saying earlier, the reason why that happened is because he's so reckless. That's a good word for it. So reckless in there. I don't think he really, he just doesn't seem he goes in there with a game plan. He's just super wild. He just wants to grab a hold of his opponents or lay his hands on him through strikes. I don't know what it is, but the guy's super wild, super reckless. I think Kang is going to weather that early storm and then just end up getting a decision victory over Gafurov. So I will go with the underdog, Kang, and we're going to move on. Now, because of all those cancellations, I don't know what the order of these fights are going to be, but this is what the orders are. This is what the order is on Tapology, so that's what we're going with. Next up, we got Rinat Fakhretdinov going up against Nicholas Dalby. Now, I am going to be picking Fakhretdinov here, but I do worry because Nicholas Dalby has made a career out of kind of being overlooked and just weaponizing his cardio to defeat his opponents. So let's go over, like, that is the perfect way to describe Dalby. He's not super dangerous. He's not going to come in there and knock you on the first round, probably not finish you early. If he does end up finishing you, it's because he's using his cardio as his best weapon. He's going to weather the storm of his opponents, and then eventually his pressure is just going to overwhelm his opponent, and he can either get a finish that way, or he can just end up taking the second and third round due to how well he does and how good of a cardio he has. That's just basically what I'm trying to say here. He's 23-4-1, and you don't get to that kind of a career record by being a shit fighter. So he's actually sneakily on a 4-fight win streak. He defeated Claudio Silva by unanimous split decision to Warlley Alves. Not the best look. Muslim Salikov, great unanimous decision victory there. And then more recently, more impressively, Gabriel Bonfim. Like I mentioned, he weaponizes his cardio. That first round he typically gives up because his opponents are fresh. They exert so much energy trying to beat Dalby in that first round that they just end up slowly fading away, and Dalby's not going anywhere over those 15 minutes. Now, Gabriel Bonfim, some of the judges had 10-8 because of how dominant he was in that first round. But the thing about Gabriel Bonfim is he's not used to getting out of that first round. So he just completely blows it in the first, ends up tiring out, gassing out, and then Dalby takes over, gets that finish in the second round. That was a fantastic win for him. Now, if you look at Fakhretdinov's last fight, he ended up drawing with Eliseo Zaleski dos Santos. I think that's his name. Yes. Who we just saw fight Randy Brown a couple of weeks ago, I believe, on the pay-per-view. I believe on UFC 302, if I'm not mistaken. But regardless, that ended up being a majority draw. Reason for that is because Fakhretdinov tired himself out over the first and second rounds, and then got obliterated in that third round, ended up surviving, which was a 10-8, and he ended up being a draw. So if you go based off of these two these two guys and solely their last performance, you would think that it spells a victory for Dalby, because exactly how Dalby wins his fights, weaponizing that cardio, getting better as the fight goes on, as his opponents kind of slow down, is exactly how he got the win, and exactly how Fakhretdinov ended up with a draw in his last fight. But the thing is, I don't think that's a proper depiction of the Fakhretdinov side. It is for Dalby because he's made a career out of that, but I think Fakhretdinov is going to be able to take down Dalby. Anybody that really attempts to get those takedowns and wrestle with Dalby has success. He's been taken down in his last 5 fights in a row. He's been taken down by Tim Means, Claudio Silva, Warley Alves, and yes, he won 4 out of those 5 fights. I understand that, but none of those fighters have the wrestling acumen that Fakhretdinov has. None of them have the control and top pressure of Fakhretdinov. And if you look at Fakhretdinov's fights, he does a great job taking his opponents down and wearing them out. Michaelides, let me see just so I have the numbers correctly here. I know he took down Brian Battle 7 times. Brian Battle, obviously not a wrestler, but he was able to take him down 7 times, outstruck him 43-3. It says that he even knocked down Brian Battle in that fight. He took down Michaelides 5 times in his UFC debut. Kevin Lee didn't have to take him down, starched him early, and then subbed him. And then his last fight against Zaleski dos Santos, he took him down 1 time, ended up being a draw. Like I said, he gassed out crazily in that third round and ended up getting 10-8'd. Good for him for surviving, though. But dos Santos has solid takedown defense. Dalby can get taken down, and I think I trust Fakhretdinov enough to win those first 2 rounds and kind of weather that storm. Whether it's going to be another draw for him, I don't know, but I will side with Renat in this matchup. I do understand that Dalby, the best weapon that he has is that cardio, so I'm going to be very stressed the longer this fight goes on, but I will trust in Fakhretdinov to get the first and second round done, and then hopefully he doesn't end up getting finished or slowing down too much in that third. So I will take Fakhretdinov here. Let's move on to the next one. Now we got Muhammad Naimov going up against Felipe Lima. Now this is one of those fights that was like a short notice replacement. Felipe Lima replaced Melsik Bagdasaryan, who tore his labrum. I don't know exactly what that is, but I am going to be picking Muhammad Naimov in this fight, and it's not because I think he's like a world beater. It's not like I think he's way better than Felipe Lima. I am unfamiliar with Lima, but I did do a little bit of research on him. I did watch his most recent fight in the Octagon promotion, and there was a lot to like about this guy. So from what I saw, he has just a great overall skill set. He's quick on the feet. He has good movement, and he will clinch up and he has slick grappling as well, some good wrestling also, but he can be taken down and kind of controlled on the mat there. We saw that in his last fight. Now the thing that's kind of tripping me out, I guess, for this matchup, he's been out of the cage for a year. I believe he was tending to an injury after the championship fight in the Octagon promotion. And then he was actually scheduled to fight next month in July against the same opponent that he defeated for the belt. So it's not like he's coming off the couch. He was training, but this is going to be a month in advance in the UFC on short notice against somebody like Naimov, who could easily fight at lightweight. We saw him fight lightweight again in his UFC debut against Jamie Malarkey and absolutely starched him, knocked him out cold in that second round. Now that's nothing to be too proud of considering Jamie Malarkey has 0 chin, but still, that was up a weight class on short notice, ended up getting it done. Didn't look too good in that fight up until that moment, but he still got it done. Now, Felipe Lima is fighting at bantamweight, and he's moving up to featherweight in this matchup. So that is the biggest reason why I'm going to go with Naimov here, because Lima was getting taken down by this bantamweight. He can get controlled on the mat, and somebody like Naimov that could easily fight up at lightweight, which is 2 weight classes ahead of where Lima typically fights, I just think he's going to outmuscle Lima in this matchup and be able to kind of grind him out, like up against the cage, on the mat, whatever it is. And typically Naimov depends on that, like out-muscling his opponent's style of fighting as well. And I think he's going to find success doing that against a smaller opponent size-wise against Lima. The other thing is Muhammad Naimov doesn't shy away from cheating. He will cheat to win. We saw that in his fight with Nathaniel Wood. This guy sacked Wood twice, grabbed the cage multiple times, had his fingers in Nathaniel Wood's gloves multiple times, and if I'm not mistaken, that was in Abu Dhabi. Let me see. Yeah, Abu Dhabi. Surprise, surprise. They didn't take away, out of 6 fouls, they didn't take away any points. They're in Saudi Arabia this time. Who am I to imagine that it's going to be any different? If the guy doesn't get in trouble for it, so why wouldn't he do it? I know he's not afraid to cheat. It's going to play in his favor probably. And like I said, I think he's just going to use his out-muscling style to kind of bully the smaller opponent in Lima. Probably through some wrestling. He's probably going to throw some heavy punches as well. And I don't know how Lima will react to it. But I do really like Felipe's skill set. I think once now that he's in the UFC and he goes down to his natural weight class of bantamweight, I know that's a very stacked division. I know there's a lot of great fighters in bantamweight, but he has the skill set to do well in the UFC, and I am going to be excited to see him later on. I just don't think he's going to be fully prepared to go up against a bigger guy like Naimov with that out-muscle kind of physicality style of fighting. And up a weight class I don't really like for Lima. Short notice I don't really like. But like I said, I like his skill set. I think he'll do well once he gets back down to bantamweight in the UFC. But for right now, I think Naimov gets this done. Let's move on. All right, Nasrat Haqparast going up against Jared Gordon. Now this fight, I just think Haqparast is like a better Jared Gordon. So this fight's probably going to stay on the feet for most of it. I can imagine maybe Jared Gordon tries to get a few takedowns, but he hasn't really found much success in the wrestling up at lightweight. He did a little bit better in that department down at featherweight. But I think Haqparast is just going to be the quicker striker, the better striker in this matchup. He has the youth advantage. It can't be by a lot. 28. Yeah, I guess Jared Gordon's 35 at this point. So how I drew it up in my book when I was doing the tape study is, or I guess when I was researching, Haqparast, I had his career trajectory like a graph going up, and I had Jared Gordon's going down because they're just at a point in their career where Jared Gordon's probably not going to be showing up better inside the octagon every time. He's probably on the decline. He's 35 years old now. Haqparast 28, probably still climbing, still can get better. He's got a lot of experience as well. So I think they're just on a complete different career trajectory. I think Nasrat Haqparast is just a better version of Gordon that's not going to probably wrestle. Now, it does concern me a little bit because Haqparast, when he went up against Landon Quinones, I think that was, it was a year after he fought John Makdessi, and that was a really close fight against somebody like Landon. Landon landed like over 130 something, maybe 140 something strikes on Haqparast and made that a scrap. Haqparast should have been able to easily defeat, I believe he was a pretty big favorite if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, minus 475, but it looked more like a pick'em when they were in there. And then his last fight out, he knocked out Jamie Mullarkey. But just like we spoke about with Naimov, that's not really something to be super stoked about because everybody knocks out Jamie Mullarkey at this point in Jamie Mullarkey's career. You look at Jared Gordon, he's coming off of that TKO victory against Mark Madsen, who really isn't, like, if you're able to shake off Madsen's takedown attempts, you're going to be able to defeat him. I believe Mark Madsen's like a previous Olympic wrestler, so that's his game plan. Obviously, he's not really a good striker, and that's exactly what Jared Gordon did. He's able to finish him there. No contest with Bobby Green, accidental head clash, but he got knocked out in that fight. Lost to Paddy Pimblett, probably should have won. All right, probably should have won that fight, but regardless, there wasn't much to love about in that fight too. He did land a few good shots on Pimblett, but other than like grinding him up against the fence, he didn't really do much. So basically, this is a long-winded discussion about how I just think Haqparast is going to be the better fighter everywhere. I think if Jared Gordon does try to decide to try and wrestle, I think Haqparast is going to be able to shake off those takedown attempts. I think he's just going to be the better striker, faster striker. I think he's going to have more moments than Gordon in this fight. So I will go with Haqparast here. I don't love it. I'm not going to say like Haqparast is on the top of my list of confidence this week, but I will be going with him to get it done. Next up, we got Johnny Walker going up against Volkan Oezdamir, and I really don't like picking for this one. Both of these fighters are basically, they're not similar in styles, but in terms of career trajectory, they're both basically the same skill level. Like, they are like top 10-ish fighters, top 15-ish fighters that can do well against lower level competition and look like world beaters. But as soon as they take that step up in competition, they end up losing. So like, let's go over to the Johnny Walker side, for example. All right, so we'll go down maybe to the Corey Anderson fight. He loses to Corey Anderson. Actually, we'll just go through his whole career. Comes in, beats Khalil Roundtree. That has aged perfectly because of how good Roundtree is, but that is not the same Roundtree that we have now. Beats Justin Ledet. Unfamiliar with that guy, but he knocked him out in 15 seconds. Misha Serkinov knocked him out in 36 seconds. Nothing to be too pumped about. Serkinov wasn't really that good. Steps up against Corey Anderson, gets knocked out in the first round. Loses to Nikita Krylov. Then he comes back, beats Ryan Spann. Loses to Thiago Santos. Loses to Jamal Hill. So like I'm saying, he can beat the lower level comp, but as soon as he steps up, he starts to lose. Then he beats Kudalaba, Paul Craig, finishes both of them, beats Anthony Smith by unanimous decision, which at the end of the day, like, it's a good win. Anthony Smith is a wily vet. He has a lot of experience, and it's good to have that win under your belt, but he probably should have finished Anthony Smith. Now, the reason why he probably didn't was he is now with SBG Ireland. I'm sure you guys have heard a lot of analysts talk about this, how he's kind of stepped away from his wild striking ways and that sort of style of fighting, that fan favorite style of fighting, and he's kind of been more methodical with his fights, and I can understand that path because at a certain point you want to stay around, and if you keep losing because you have that fan favorite style where you just kind of with reckless abandon go in head first, throw caution to the wind, and then get knocked out, you're not going to have a job in the UFC eventually if you keep doing that. So it's a good switch up. Then he goes up against Magomed Ankalaev. Accidental illegal knee, ends up being a no contest. I don't know how that's not a disqualification win for Johnny Walker. Petr Yan had to give up his belt for that. There's inconsistency in the UFC, and I don't like it. Regardless, no contest there. And then he rematches Ankalaev. He gets knocked out in the second round. Now you go over to Volkan Oezdamir. It's kind of same story. That lower level comp he can beat. The moment he steps up, he starts to lose. So, OSP, back in 2017, split decision win. Not the best, but OSP, a nice, good vet to have under your belt. Misha Serkinov, same idea, 30-second win, just like Johnny Walker did. And then he comes back and beats Jimmy Manua. Saw the 22-second knockout. Fantastic. But then he goes up against Daniel Cormier. Who's going to fault him for losing to Daniel Cormier? Probably nobody. Then he gets choked out by Anthony Smith back in 2018. Now, that's a different Anthony Smith than Johnny Walker had to face in 2023. 5-year difference there, of course. Then he loses a split decision to Dominic Reyes. Knocks out Latifi. Split decision win over Rakic is actually a solid win to have as well. But then he goes up against Prohaska. Gets knocked out. Loses a unanimous decision to Ankalaev. Can't fault him there. Beats Paul Craig by unanimous decision. Loses to Krylov and then comes back and rear naked chokes Bogdan Guskov. So basically, these two, very similar in terms of how they do when they have to step up in competition. So how are they going to do against each other when they're probably equal level of skills? I am going to be picking Volkan Oezdamir here, though, because I do not trust Johnny Walker's chin whatsoever. I can see a world where Johnny Walker kind of plays that distance game, that not so wild, kind of in the pocket exchanging, with Oezdamir and kind of like points his way to a victory. But I can also see a world where Oezdamir kind of just puts him away. Johnny Walker can be doing fantastic for 14 minutes of a 15-minute fight and then get knocked out. He can get knocked out with any punch that lands on him. I don't trust his chin. I really wanted to pick Johnny Walker in this matchup, but he's let me down too many times with his chin. If somebody like Volkan hits him clean, I think he knocks him out. And I don't like it. I don't like having to pick a fighter in this matchup, but I will go with Volkan Oezdamir. Let's move on to the next fight. We got Xiao Magomedov going up against Antonio Trocoli. Now, this fight is another one that was kind of like a last-minute replacement. Magomedov was supposed to fight Ihor Potieria. I guess it wasn't really like a... Oh, yeah, there was a couple of switch-ups for this fight. So he was supposed to fight Ihor Potieria, but Ihor stepped in on short notice a few weeks ago to fight Michel Pereira. And then they signed somebody named Joelton Luderbach, who just pissed hot and failed his urine test, so he couldn't fight. He's on the sauce. So anyway, he had to pull out of that fight. Xiao Magomedov ends up with Antonio Trocoli. Now, Trocoli's had a weird couple of months. We were supposed to break him down last week, and we were supposed to break him down a couple weeks ago as well. He was supposed to fight Umar C. I always mess that up. You're supposed to fight that. Him ends up pulling out of that fight. Then he was supposed to fight Aliskerov last week. Aliskerov obviously had to move a week in advance to step in for Chimaev to fight Whittaker. So that fight also got canceled. Before that, in 2022, he's supposed to fight OSP. And then before that, he was out of the octagon since November 2021. This guy hasn't fought for almost 3 years. 2.5 years he hasn't been in the octagon. He was on the Contender Series. I'm pretty sure he won, but he was on steroids. So they had a no contest. They didn't sign him. He takes a 2-year break. Goes fights on the regional scene once, gets a first-round rear naked choke, and then all of a sudden now he's in the UFC. Craziness. They've been trying to get him a fight for 2 years, and they're like, dude, you got to fight, or we're going to cut you. I think that was the whole thing with him having to fight Aliskerov, so he's probably pumped because now he has a different opponent, but I probably wouldn't be pumped for him to have, if I was him, going up against somebody like Shara Bullet. I just think Shara is going to absolutely destroy him. I just think he's going to piece him up. I don't see this going well for Trocoli at all. I don't have a technical analysis for this. Magomedov is itching to get back in the octagon. Trocoli, I think, is just trying to keep his job. I'm going to go with Magomedov here, probably to knock Trocoli out, honestly. I don't think he's going to be prepared for somebody like Magomedov. I don't think he's going to be able to do much. Maybe he goes for takedowns. I have no idea. That would be his best case scenario because we saw there's a hole in Magomedov's wrestling game, but I think he just knocks out Trocoli. Let's move on to the next fight. We got Kelvin Gastelum going up against the Daniel Rodriguez. And this fight, to me, I was honestly going to go with Kelvin Gastelum because I see a path to victory for him. Wrestle. If he goes all in on the wrestling, I think he beats somebody like D-Rod, who doesn't have the greatest takedown defense. It can get taken down by his opponents, and typically wants to stand. And even though Gastelum does have decent hands, I think Daniel Rodriguez is just the technically more sound fighter. I think he's going to find the most success on the feet against Gastelum. He has the volume on his side as well. But the thing is, like I said, there's a clear path for Gastelum. I just don't think he's going to implement it. He decides to just stand and bang with his opponents, even though he can wrestle them and probably get the win. I don't know if it's like he wants to be fan-friendly. I don't know what it is, a lapse of judgment, low IQ sort of thing, but he won't implement that wrestling to ensure his wins, to kind of, I don't know why he doesn't do it. And the other thing, another reason why I'm kind of going over to the Daniel Rodriguez side is today I saw a video on Twitter. It was like during the press conference. I don't think they have a media day for fight nights. Maybe they do. Regardless, they were interviewing him, and they were asking him about the weight cut down to 170. And I don't know if he's trolling. I don't know if he's trying to kind of get under the skin of Daniel Rodriguez. I don't know if he's trying to play with his head. But he was talking about how he is stressed out that he may not make 170. I don't like that. Like, so how, if he's already worried about it days in advance, how's he going to look on the scale? Is he even going to be close to it? But then I read farther into it, and Daniel Rodriguez has apparently confirmed that there has been talks about a 180-pound catchweight fight against Gastelum. So how mentally prepared is Gastelum going to be for this fight when he's so worried about how the weight cut's going to go, whether they're going to get that 180 catchweight bout approved? I don't know what's going on. But regardless of that, which is a huge external factor for my choice in this matchup, I will have to see what plays out in the tomorrow with the weigh-ins. I will have to see what they end up deciding to do with the weight of the fight as well. But I don't think Gastelum's going to wrestle as much as he does. And even when Rodriguez does get taken down, he makes his way back to his feet, and he still has a ton of volume. Like, just before we end up going to the co-main event, let's talk about the volume a little bit here. So in his last fight against Gary, not a good look. I will give you guys that one. That was not good. But Machado Gary might be like the real deal. We're yet to see, but you can't fault him too much for that. Against Neil Magny, this guy got taken down 5 times and still outstruck Magny 66-57. Yes, he did end up getting submitted in that fight, so take that for what you will. The fight before that, Li Jingliang took him down once, still outstruck him 88-78. In his fight with Kevin Lee, got taken down 3 times against Kevin Lee and outstruck him 120-56. Skipping the Preston Parsons fight, we go up against, he fought Mike Perry, not a wrestler by any means. I will give you guys that. But he took him down twice and outstruck him. Sorry, Mike Perry took down D-Rod twice, but D-Rod outstruck him 129-61. You go to the Gabe Green fight. He threw up 175 significant strikes in 15 minutes. That is insanity. That's insanity. Earlier on in his career, he was actually mixing in the takedowns as well, but I think Kelvin Gastelum has a 30% takedown accuracy. He got absolutely mauled against Sean Brady his last time out, which I don't think happens with D-Rod, because I don't think D-Rod's going to be all in on the wrestling against somebody like Gastelum, but I don't think Gastelum has crazy takedown ability. If he does end up using that game plan, I still trust D-Rod to have more volume, to get back to his feet, and probably have better, bigger moments on the feet. I just don't like how Gastelum's been looking since his return. He hasn't been doing too well. D-Rod hasn't looked great either, but like I said, I side with him for the volume. I think he's going to be able to fend off most of the takedowns. Even if he does get taken down, I know he'll work back to his feet and give the judges more to score. So I'm going to take another underdog here in Daniel Rodriguez. And let's move on to the co-main event. Co-main, we got Sergey Pavlovich going up against Alexander Volkov. Now, you can't really get too technical with the analysis in a heavyweight fight. Yes, this is the fight game, so in any division, one punch can alter the entire thing, but that is especially true for heavyweight, and especially true for a fight that involves Pavlovich. Now, yes, he is coming off of his knockout loss to Aspinall, but between his UFC debut against Overeem and that Aspinall fight, this guy has been torching and just destroying anybody they put in his way. Let's look into it. Knocks out this Marcelo Golm guy in the first round. Maurice Green, first round. Abdurakhimov, first round. Derek Lewis, 55 seconds. Tuivasa, 54 seconds. Curtis Blades, 3 minutes and 8 seconds. This guy is just starching anybody they put in his way. Now, Volkov is probably a frame that he hasn't seen before, so this might be a little bit trickier for him. Volkov is 6'7", and he's got an 80-inch reach, which is what? Pavlovich has a 4-inch reach advantage. That's insane. I did not know that. That's crazy. Okay, so apparently Pavlovich doesn't have to worry about the size and height of Volkov because he has a longer reach. That's insanity. I did not expect that. Regardless, how I'm thinking about this fight is a lot of people are probably going to be on Volkov here because they saw Pavlovich get dusted by Aspinall, who we are dubbing to be like the best heavyweight right now. Technically, he is like interim belt, whatever. I think he smokes John Jones. That's for a different time. I don't think we'll ever see that fight anyway, so it doesn't matter. But I think a lot of people like the Volkov side because Volkov is he's a decent fighter, man. He uses that range well. He's good on the feet. He's powerful. He can also mix in the wrestling and the grappling. But apparently Pavlovich has that wrestling background. He hasn't really needed to use it because he just absolutely destroys people. But yeah, so Volkov is like a nice complete package in terms of fighting ability. Just I don't think I'm gonna side with him in this particular matchup because I'm not ready to give up on Pavlovich yet. I still think the guy's an absolute beast. I think he's a tank. I think he finds that strike that puts Volkov away. And one of the things that's making me think that is because like it's just like what I was saying with Johnny Walker. So I'm not saying Volkov is chinny like Johnny Walker. Volkov's only been put away twice in his career. Once was to Derek Lewis, forgivable. Derek Lewis is the knockout leader in the UFC, I believe. And then the one before that was was this guy named Vitaly Minikov, who was 12-0 at the time and is 22-2 right now, who has 13 career KOs. So probably can't blame him too much for that. And that was back in 2013. So his last KO loss was Derek Lewis back in 2018. So it's been 6 years almost since he got knocked out last. But the reason why I want to bring that up is because similar to Johnny Walker, I'm not saying he has a chin like Johnny Walker. That's not my point. But what I'm saying is Johnny Walker can be fighting a perfect fight, but then if the guy opposite of him lands clean, he can knock him out. We saw that happen to Volkov. Volkov was destroying Derek Lewis, but 10 seconds left in the fight, Derek Lewis finds that one big shot. I think Pavlovich is going to be able to find that shot at any point in this fight. He may not do it in the first round, and I don't know how his gas tank is going to hold up because we haven't really seen him out of that first round. Let me double check. All right, UFC career. Every fight has finished in the first round. So how is this guy going to look in the second round if Volkov doesn't end up going to sleep in that first round? We don't know. I don't know. That's for sure. But I think Pavlovich does find that shot. A big thing that does worry me, though, is he crashes the pocket with reckless abandon. This guy doesn't care what you throw at him. He's just going to try to eat it so that he can land his own punch because he knows that if he lands clean on you, he will put you to sleep. And that is, I'm not over-exaggerating. That's just how Pavlovich fights. He's going to crash in there, barely any head movement. He's going to get tagged a few times, but it doesn't matter because he's landing that right or left, and he's going to be putting you away. And I think he ends up doing that to Volkov as well. I don't like the price tag on him. I think he's like minus 200 and something. That is, I don't like that. I wish there was more value on him, but he is going to be my pick. I think he knocks out Volkov. And that's all. There's nothing else to say. Let's move on to the main event. We got Robert Whittaker going up against Aliskerov. I'm shocked that Aliskerov isn't like this isn't like a pick'em and that Aliskerov is the underdog, but I can kind of understand it because Whittaker is former champion, a great overall fighter, and he finds ways to win. His three most recent losses in the UFC before those last three losses, his last loss was in 2014 against Stephen Thompson. And then he goes on a 9 fight win streak. Then he loses to Adesanya. Goes on a 3-fight win streak. Loses to Adesanya again. This time unanimously and doesn't get knocked out. Beats Marvin Vettori. Then he loses to Dricus du Plessis. If you guys are seeing the trend here, he has only lost in his last 3 fights. His last 3 losses are to a former champion in Adesanya, who is one of the best middleweights to fight in the UFC, and Dricus du Plessis, who is the current champion. He's the current champion. Anyway, comes back, beats Paulo Costa, got wobbled in that fight, but he clearly won that fight, and it was a good win for him. And now he's taking on Aliskerov. Now, he was supposed to go up against Chimaev, who I was actually going to pick against. I was going to pick Whittaker in that fight as well. And at this point in the career, we've actually seen Chimaev accomplish dominance in the UFC against UFC caliber opponents, but we've seen that similar dominance in Aliskerov, just not against as tough of competition. So why wouldn't I just go with Whittaker as well? Because I was going to pick him against Chimaev also. It's just the other thing too is Aliskerov wasn't even supposed to fight this guy. A week ago, this guy was fighting on UFC Vegas 93. All right, you're supposed to fight Antonio Trocoli. Do you know how big of a difference it is to go up against Trocoli and Robert Whittaker, especially on a week's notice? This guy was originally supposed to fight Andre Muniz. Then he got told he was fighting Antonio Trocoli. And then he steps in and fights one of the toughest fights in his division on like a week's notice in another country. Like, how prepared is he going to be? I know these guys are probably training every day. They're always in shape. They're ready to roll. I get that. But it's like the craziness in difference of level of competition from what he thought he was going to be involved in and what he is actually going to be involved in is just, it's crazy. Robert Whittaker is the full, complete package of a fighter. He's going to be the better striker in this matchup. I don't care if people think, oh, Aliskerov has been dominating his opponents. I get that. But Mario Souza on the Contender Series takes him down, Kimuras him in the first round. Great win. Phil Hawes knocks him out. Who hasn't knocked out Phil Hawes? Knocks out Warley Alves. These aren't people that are even in the same realm as Robert Whittaker. Yes, I know Whittaker is 33 at this point in his career. He's been wobbled. He's been chinned before. I get that. But Robert Whittaker is going to be the better striker. I don't know how long Aliskerov is even going to entertain the striking. He probably will go for the wrestling at probably early, to be honest. I think that might be his best bet. But Robert Whittaker has an 82% takedown defense. 82%. 82%. All right, and Aliskerov only has a 33% takedown accuracy. He's only gotten one takedown under the UFC umbrella. Now, mind you, he really hasn't had to take down his opponents, but isn't that like more of confidence you get on the Whittaker side? This guy is probably getting used to starching his opponents and is going to want to stand with Whittaker. I don't think that's a good idea. I think Aliskerov should wrestle. I don't trust that he's going to do it early enough. I think Whittaker is the higher IQ fighter. I think he's the better striker. If Aliskerov mixes in those takedowns, if Whittaker has Whittaker even been subbed before? Yeah, he's been subbed he's been subbed once. And that was against that was back in October 2011. 13 years ago, he hasn't been subbed. So does Aliskerov end up getting the submission? I don't think so. How is Aliskerov going to do in a 5-round fight? I don't know. I know how Robert Whittaker will do. I know how he's going. I don't think he'll gas out. I know he's going to be there for the entire 25 minutes. That's why I understand why he's the favorite here. I wish he wasn't. I wish I got underdog money on Robert Whittaker, but I think he gets this done. I think he does. Aliskerov had to game plan for 3 separate opponents with 3 separate styles of fighting. Whittaker was going up against Chimaev, who he was preparing for, and now he gets Aliskerov, who is arguably just a worse version of Chimaev. We haven't seen him do what Chimaev has done. He might be that at that caliber. He might be the next Chimaev, if you would, but in terms of skill level, but we haven't seen it yet. So at this point, he is just a worse version of the fighter he was already preparing for. I think he's going to be more prepared. That's my argument here. I trust Whittaker to be there for the full 25 and be fully prepared for somebody like Aliskerov. And that's going to be the breakdown video, guys. So let's go over all the picks before we head out. So to start off the show, we got Chang Ho Lee, Magomed Gadzhiyasulov, Kyung Ho Kang, Renat Fakhretdinov, Mohamed Naimov, Nasrat Haqparast, Volkan Oezdamir, Shara Magomedov, Daniel Rodriguez, Sergey Pavlovich, and Robert Whittaker. Now, 2 of these fights are a pick'em, and 2 of the ones that we have chosen are underdogs. So I usually like to have like 2, 3, sometimes 4 underdogs on a fight card, but I'm going to consider those 2 pick'em fights like underdogs because it's a pick'em. You know what I'm saying? Regardless, thank you guys so much for watching another one of my breakdown videos. Like I said, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and drop your thoughts below in the comment section. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.